I understand that she was very sociable the entire trip. Talked quite a bit.
About what?
Oh, that's between the deputies, the courts, and the prosecutor, apparently. I don't know that.
Well, things got weird in the Daybell saga as Lori Daybell tried to get chummy with the deputies who were extraditing her to Arizona to face new murder charges. All the while, her husband Chad was begging a judge in his murder case to allow cameras into the courtroom when he goes to trial in April. Remember, April Fool's Day. And with all this wacky stuff happening, the case against Delphi's alleged killer, Richard Allen, might be unraveling. Stay tuned with Profiling Evil as we get your new week started in true crime. Hey, well, welcome to Profiling Evil in this episode as you get this new week started. Lori Vallow Daybell has been booked into a Maricopa County Correctional Facility. And here are the first images as she exits that van in the dark hours and walks into that Maricopa County jail. It appears that she traveled in these light blue coat clothes, but we're going to see her transfer into orange in a minute here, accompanied by at least 4 deputies, including one female deputy that ensured that she was watched after when she went to the restroom and other things on that trip. Now, Daybell was scheduled to appear the following morning for her first face against those 2 murder charges. The timing was interesting, and Arizona officials decided that they were going to make an 18-hour drive in the 11th hour, deciding that flying her from Idaho to Arizona posed too many problems, mostly problems surrounding the weather. But that drive required more deputies and several vehicles to ensure that they weren't going to have some vehicle problems or, frankly, that they weren't going to have tired drivers. Now, this female deputy that joined, that's for obvious reasons, and we may learn more about that as this thing goes on. The Maricopa County Sheriff said they determined, based on the weather and the delay possibilities that we were having with that big band of weather that came through over the weekend, including the fact that Daybell's such a high-profile individual now, that driving her down was actually safer, and it was easier to conceal the itinerary, the direction they were traveling from the public. Now, we've been waiting for months since Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs made the move to have her extradited. But regardless of what happens in Arizona, Daybell still has to serve 3 consecutive life sentences before going to Arizona, where she could face even more jail time for conspiring to kill her husband, Charles Vallow, and attempting to kill her niece's husband, Brandon Bedreau. And you probably remember all those cases. If not, go back and watch some of our earlier videos. But I think Daybell's getting pretty accustomed to the criminal justice system now. I guess 3 murders under your belt can do that for a convict. But here we are in her first appearance. She's inquiring about how the 2 Arizona cases are going to be handled. Are they going to be joined or tried separately? She also wanted to know how many attorneys she was going to have and when she was going to have the chance to meet them for the first time.
Well, she's been dubbed the Doomsday Mom. Lori Vallow Daybell is finally back in Arizona, booked into a Maricopa County jail. Our Faye Fredericks is here to explain why she was brought back to the Valley. Faye.
Yeah, Javier, Lori Vallow Daybell arrived from Idaho overnight. She's been booked on 2 first-degree murder charges here. Earlier this year, she was indicted for conspiring to kill her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Bedreau. She's also been indicted for conspiring to kill her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. Now, a new video shows her arriving at the jail last night after an 18-hour drive from Idaho to Arizona with 4 Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies. They arrived just after midnight. Vallow Daybell then appeared before a Maricopa County judge this morning, asking how her cases and legal representation would be handled.
Are those cases going to be combined, or are they going to be done separately?
Well, they are 2 separate cases, but they're going to be handled at the same hearing.
Vallow Daybell will head to the Estrella Women's Jail. Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone says while in county custody, she'll be held in isolation because this case is so high profile. Penzone also giving us insight into how Daybell has been acting during her trip back to the Valley.
I understand that she was very sociable the entire trip, talked quite a bit.
Vallow Daybell will be in Arizona through the entirety of this case, then sent back to Idaho, where she's serving 3 life sentences for killing her 2 youngest children and conspiring to kill her 5th husband's previous wife. Her next court appearance is December 7th.
Well, we do know that she has an appearance scheduled for December 7th, so just a couple of days from now, and that's when we're going to learn more and frankly, the answers to probably many of those questions. But all of this, in my opinion, brings up an interesting question. If murder cases are so dang expensive to prosecute, and you hear every jurisdiction around America and frankly the world talking about how expensive it is, why is Arizona going forward with this trial? I mean, this thing could cost $1 million, and if luck has it, Daybell would have died 3 times for the murders in Idaho. So what's the purpose of this? Now, I'd like you to weigh in on how you feel about that question, folks, and please put your comments down below. But here are my thoughts on why this is so important. Charles Vallow's family and Brandon Bedreau's family deserve justice. Frankly, Lori Daybell shouldn't get away from this without facing the consequences of her decision, even if it doesn't mean she's going to be able to serve and be serve 4 lives here on earth or 5 lives. Now, I, for one, am all for Arizona's trial going forward. And frankly, I can't wait to learn more about the evidence they have that ties these cases back to Lori Vallow Daybell. But let's take a minute and listen to the sheriff's comments on that extradition. And then I want you, during the comments and maybe after, to weigh in on why Lori Daybell was so chatty on the drive from Idaho to Arizona. Frankly, I think it's pretty obvious given what we've learned about her manipulative behaviors. But let's watch this and then take a moment, folks, to weigh in down below. And make sure you're taking time to read each other's comments and respond to each other.
My name is Paul Penzone. I'm the sheriff of Maricopa County in Arizona. We're just going to give you an update on a story of interest, not just here in Arizona, but I know across the nation. Just after midnight last night, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office deputies booked Lori Vallow into our ITR facility. 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of premeditated first-degree murder. She was extradited from Pocatello, Idaho, where she was already in their Department of Corrections there in custody at one of the prisons. We sent 4 deputies there by car. Normally we would fly, our extradition team would fly to pick it up, but because of weather conditions, we felt that it was more predictable and more within our control that if we were going to transport her, that we wouldn't have to deal with any kind of weather conditions or air travel challenges. So our deputies left on the 27th for Idaho, arrived there, stayed for a day to prepare, and brought her back. We sent 2 extradition deputies, a supervisor, and 1 deputy from our K-9 division, but it's just because she's a female deputy. We want to make sure there was a female accompanying suspect Vallow in her travel back. It was about an 18-hour trip. In my statement, as you saw, I talked about the fact that we do about 250 plus extraditions every year. So this is not new for them. The uniqueness or maybe the circumstances involved in this particular case are very high profile and much to the interest of our local and national audience. I don't want to diminish it. It is what we do, as I stated, and we do it very well. Whether it is her or any other fugitive who's wanted in the state of Arizona, we're going to facilitate transfer into our custody so the prosecutor's office can prosecute them effectively. So I don't, there's not a whole lot more depth to it than that. I just want to make sure you heard from me the status of it, and I'm happy to answer a few questions if they're related to this case.
Sure.
I'll start with
I was going to say, will she be kept in any sort of segregated situation, or is she going to be in just booked regularly in which jail?
Yeah, no, that is a good question. She will be. She's deemed to be high security, so she'll be isolated in a high security area, the Estrella jail.
Tell us what goes into a process such as this. You've dealt with high-profile inmates in the past. That's not new, but obviously this planning has been going on, I would assume, for some time.
It has, and we wanted to make sure that it was During my tenure as sheriff, I feel like our focus has always been about being really fundamentally sound and less about the bells and whistles. And the men and women who put the planning and preparation took everything into consideration. As I said, we had challenging weather conditions. The last thing we wanted to do was try to fly, get stuck at an airport, where suddenly now we're in a space where there's a lot of community members and others, and it takes an extensive period of time. If we're going to travel that road, we need to make sure that we had the appropriate vehicles. As I said, we sent a female deputy to make sure that we had a female deputy accompanying a female inmate. We sent those from our FATE detail, and extraditions facilitated this because we're the best at managing any kind of transfer of custody or apprehension of those deemed to be dangerous. And make no mistake about it, sometimes I think we look at a person and judge them by appearance, and we go, well, this is a relatively moderate-sized female. What kind of a threat can she be? She is as much, if not more, of a threat to the harm of others as any other dangerous criminal we've had in our custody.
Well, what are your thoughts on this one, folks? I hope you're going to put your comments down below. And while you're doing that, I want to return to Idaho for just a quick chat about the co-conspirator in this case, Chad Daybell. Now, Daybell, Chad, appeared in court to request that cameras would be allowed into the courtroom during his trial. He wants them there, and I suspect they are going to villainize Lori Daybell. Now, Daybell and his defense attorneys want the cameras in the courtroom, but the prosecution was arguing they shouldn't be. Now, they're really concerned about the presence of the cameras and whether it could intimidate witnesses and threaten to turn the case, which has already got a massive amount of media attention, into another circus. Well, the defense wasn't alone in wanting cameras in that courtroom. In fact, there was an attorney who represented a batch of media outlets in Idaho, including the Idaho Press Club. In the end, the judge felt that the family members who couldn't afford to travel to the trial, regardless of where it's held, deserve the chance to watch the proceedings on television. I'm glad, aren't you? That means we're going to be able to watch this one in real time. Now, he also felt that the public had a right to witness the process, to see the evidence, and to hear the testimony in this case. And he's acknowledged that the case has, in fact, garnered international attention. Yeah, I think that's an understatement, Judge. But from the bench, Judge Boyce ruled that the court would provide a live stream of the trial that would be shared to the media and out to all of us. Discussions around whether microphones or cameras would be allowed also came up in these discussions. And again, it sounds like the court's going to really control any kind of recording that's going on inside. I suspect phones might be prevented during this one, except for maybe tweeting and texting inside the meeting. Now, discussions also swirled around where the trial was going to be held. Daybell wants his trial to be held up in Boise, but the state wants it moved back to Fremont County. Now, the defense and the judge expressed concern that they might have a hard time finding jurors in such a small community. And in the end, the judge stated he's going to issue a ruling in the coming days, leaving us all to wait and wonder where that trial is going to be held. Well, I joined Vinnie Politan and a team of experts to talk about Daybell's hearing on Court TV. At one point, Vinnie asked me about how cults can successfully convince seemingly intelligent people to believe in the ideology of the cult and even commit crimes in the name of the cult. Let's watch that.
All right, Mike King, a lot of testimony about they. So it seems you may have to tie Lori and Chad together as a unit, but that's not the way it's going to play at trial. Obviously, he's going to try to get away from her. What are your thoughts about Chad Daybell being the so-called doomsday prophet, and some of the witnesses who will be called were some of his followers? How does that play?
I think it plays very well to teach the lesson that these coercive groups like this one, where they have coercive mind control, are masterful at getting people to buy off in the ideology. And it's the boiling a frog kind of a thing, Vinny. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly, piece by piece, they get people like the group that we're seeing investing in the belief system. And once they start investing in that belief system, they then can't admit the fact that, hey, maybe I was duped, maybe I was wrong, maybe these are a bunch of crazy people. And it gives me this flashback memory of dealing with a ritual murderer who murdered a number of people. And with his brother, they came up with the same kinds of ideologies, and they started broadcasting or prophesizing that they were going to commit these murders or that these people were going to die before they did it. And of course, there's always one who seems to be the one who is the voice of whatever this God is they believe in. And then the other comes along, and they're the arm of the God's wishes, and they're the one that gets to fulfill it. And somehow, as a group, they get everyone to buy off on this ideology.
In our discussions, we also talked about whether Chad was in charge or whether Lori was in charge, and how big of a difference that made in Chad's upcoming murder trial. Now, you see, in her trial, the prosecution clearly made it obvious in that trial that Lori Vallow Daybell was the person in charge of the Doomsday Cult. Well, as prosecutors try to point a heavy finger at Chad Daybell, they're going to have to also talk about this issue. Now, they're saying Chad Daybell orchestrated Tammy Daybell's murder. Did Lori say, hey, this is the right thing to do? And what was Lori's impact, especially with Alex Cox being the potential killer? I mean, how does this all shake out? I want you to put your comments down below as we watch this video clip.
You know, Mike King, as we were looking at those photographs, which were evidence in court during Lori's trial of the couple getting married down in Hawaii, prosecutors wanted to put her to death. Now they want to put him to death. How do you see this issue playing inside a courtroom in Idaho?
Yeah, can't you? Every time I look at this picture that's on the screen right now, it just drives me batty, Vinny. I think there's a couple of things to consider in this case. Number one, Lori got away with getting out of the death penalty. But this case also involves the murder of Tammy, which is independent and still could be a death penalty case, I would suspect. And I guess that's something that I need to kind of learn and understand a little better. But this thing boils down to the fact that there was planning, there was preparation, it was premeditated. It's clear through the revelations that were coming out and him saying for weeks in advance that she too was going to die early. How come everybody around them is scheduled to die early except for the two of them? The fact that they're married 2 weeks after, I think, is all going to lead toward this. And I think it kind of sets them apart in a small way. But I think it is a little bit of a challenge because you can't give it to one and not the other in most of our thinking. And so this is going to be really interesting to see what they respond to. And I really loved hearing the AG talk a little bit about this case, because I keep going back to the fact that I think the prosecution needs to be really cautious when they introduce the ritualism and the ritual crime portion of this versus the elements of murder, because that's what this is about. And then the fact that they were religious zealots is aggravating factors that should go into the sentencing, in my opinion.
Well, the most important part of that hearing, outside the fact that the news cameras are going to be allowed in court, is that the court's ruling in the state of Idaho got to agree on the same facts in the Chad Daybell case as they did in the Lori Vallow Daybell case. In other words, the state has to present the same thing they presented in Lori's trial, except for the obvious that it's going to be about Tammy, and that's going to take it a little different direction. Now, the court is yet to rule on whether the death penalty is going to be included or removed from Chad Daybell's trial. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch, and I want to know what your thoughts are about all those issues, including whether Chad should be spared the death penalty. Well, hey, everybody, I'm Mike from Profiling Evil, and I want to share 2 great gift ideas for the 2023 Christmas holidays.
I'm making available at a special price two of my most popular books. First is Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, and the second is She Knew No Fear. You can purchase them individually, or you can get them at a special bundled price. And right now, as a special, I'll be signing them if you'd like. Now, Deceived is about my investigation into and the ultimate takedown of a ritual child abuse cult that was sexually abusing children, a large group of children. 12 people were ultimately convicted in this thing following a pre-dawn raid. And although the court process ended decades ago, the suffering that was endured by the children continues today. Now, I wrote this book because some of the victims asked me to tell their story. It happened during a presentation of the case on the Dr. Phil show, as well as several other international news channels. And I was so compelled by the children asking this, now adult women, that we went ahead and wrote the book. The book doesn't reveal the horrors that the kids faced, but it acknowledges that the abuse occurred. More importantly, it's a story about how destructive cults, like this one, can be destroyed, where the system works and where the system failed in that case. And it talks about how the investigation and the prosecution literally changed the way in which cults are handled today. The book explores the cult recruiting tactics used by this particular group, and they seem to be consistent with other cults. It also talks about how we can protect our loved ones from falling prey to these perverted predators. And here's the really cool news from my perspective. Proceeds from Deceived are going toward building a new children's advocacy center. That's a place where children can be forensically and physically examined, receive physical and emotional care while being prepared for the court system. The hope is that when they walk out of the doors of a children's advocacy center, they're healthier than when they arrived. Deceived is in paperback, and it's available signed for $20. Now, my other book is She Knew No Fear, and it's a story about how I solved my great-great-grandmother's murder. She was shot and killed at a town celebration back in 1891. The story chronicles her journey from her native Scotland home to the United States. This woman walked barefooted across the plains of the United States, and she conquered the perilous Hole in the Rock expedition. She fought wild Indians, and she settled in the Four Corners area of the United States, only to be gunned down at age 40, leaving children behind. One of those children was my grandfather. Now, the book explores how I solved her murder 130 years later, and how miracles from heaven, in my opinion, guided my investigation, resulting in the discovery of my great-great-grandfather's handwritten account of the murder. If you like stories about the Wild West, family history, true crime, this is a book for you, and I think you'd really enjoy She Knew No Fear. Now listen, thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. You can get She Knew No Fear hardbound versions for $30 signed and delivered, or you can get a bundle of both books for $45. And I'm happy to put a little personal inscription if you'd like that in there, but you gotta order quickly. Now, thanks for all your support of Profiling Evil, and for those of you who are Christian, Merry Christmas. For the rest, happy holidays, everyone. But now, let's shift gears and go to another high-profile murder case and talk about these ups and downs that are occurring in the Delphi, Indiana murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. I'd like you each to weigh in on this one, too, and tell me if you think the state has the right defendant in this case, Richard Allen. Now, the court and the prosecution continue to come under fire by Allen's multiple defense teams who say that he's merely a pawn in all this and he didn't commit the murders. The defense has tried to get the judge, Fran Gull, removed from the trial, and they want the original defense team. Now, that was the attorneys who were tied to the man who leaked the crime scene photos to be back on the team. The Indiana Attorney General has sided with the judge, and he's asked the trial for Allen to be earlier than October of 2024, a date that's now on the books. And frankly, I'd love to see that one go to trial before 2024 of October. Now, the case continues to heat up, and the concerns over conspiracies by white supremacists and Odinists continues to be the lead story. And it was again on Court TV as Vinnie Politan asked me about my thoughts surrounding defense claims that Richard Allen wasn't responsible and that somebody else committed those horrible murders. You know, I met with those girls' family at CrimeCon. I'll tell you what, this has got to be such a horrendous thing for them. But before I play this clip, I want to say very clearly that I personally have no idea what additional evidence the state has, but I do believe the state is going to have to step up their game and satisfactorily answer many of the questions that the jury's going to undoubtedly have. Let's watch this.
One of the guards said, listen, I'm not an Odinist. I practice heathenry. Is there a difference? Are these things connected? What, from your perspective, what is an Odinist? And who are these people that we're talking about that are doing what they're alleged to be doing by the defense?
I think the easiest way to explain it is Odinism is a prison gang. It is a gang that disguises itself as a religion. Odinism, specifically in prisons, started by a woman named Elsa Christensen in the early 1980s in Florida. And their sole purpose for gathering as a religion was so that they could have cover to then talk about white supremacist political activity and other activity with impunity. So Odinism is, think of it as Odinism, if you think about it, it's the Westboro Baptist Church of Germanic and Norse paganism, which all of the things we're talking about right now fall under kind of this umbrella of Germanic and Norse paganism. Germanic in the sense of Germanic languages. So you think of Anglo-Saxon, Frankish, Aramaic, all of these tribes that existed pre-Christianity in Northern Europe. So then you have Asatru. Asatru and Odinism are not the same thing. Asatru in the United States, I'm speaking specifically in the United States because it is different in Europe, is a racist but not white supremacist gang racist form of paganism. So they believe that to be a Norse pagan, that should be allowed to people with Norse descent, so white people essentially. You have to be white enough. And then you have heathenry. So heathenry is a blanket term. I practice what's called inclusive heathenry, and we believe anyone can be heathen. You know, as we say, we're not so arrogant to think we know who the gods are going to call, right? We're not going to try to tell our gods what to do. And so the problem that I'm seeing in here is, first of all, Odinite is not a thing. I don't know where they come up with this. It's a mineral. It's found in like sedimentary areas. I have a geology background, so the first time I read that, I was very confused as to why they were talking about rocks. But also, I think one important thing is to remember is that Odinism is present anywhere that there's racism because it's not a religion. It's a gang that is in prisons using the guise of religion to be able to gather and do gang activity.
Gotcha. I mean, and they sort of say that, but not exactly the way you're saying. So, Mike King, from your background, knowing what we know, limited obviously, but about the crime scene, about what happened here, the allegations of the defense, does this strike you as a ritualistic type of murder? What happened to Abby and Libby? And do you see it being in sync with these allegations of these rocks/Odinites who are practicing, I guess, outside of prison and meeting and doing things allegedly together?
Well, I really like that quick lesson that we just had, and I appreciate that because it helped me kind of put into perspective a couple of my thoughts, Vinny. And first and foremost, we have to recognize that groups like white supremacist groups for decades have used symbology to somehow get across messaging. We also know that criminals can go in and create a crime scene. They go from a very organized state to this very disorganized state where we see all kinds of bizarre things happening, but then go through a process of staging where they spend some time maybe sharing things that they saw. We saw it with Richard Ramirez. Remember that pentagram that he kept writing on the wall? He told me personally he was never a Satanist at first, but it became good business. So we got to keep in mind, is this an artifact of what was really going on? If this was truly a group of people who were going through ritual crime, I think we'd see evidence in other locations to support it, not just relationships or a video that came out that somebody, including Richard Allen, could have seen and recreated on the fly in the middle of a crime scene. We have to look at this thing in totality and not get sucked into these individual pieces of really amazing pieces of evidence and information, because we can go down rabbit holes that completely cause us to forget all the facts and just twist everything we're seeing to fit whatever goofy theory we're coming up with. And I guess this is what really is putting pressure on the prosecution to make sure they can come in.
Absolutely. Reasonable doubt
listen,
comes in many different forms. You throw stuff in there.
You're not kidding.
Yeah.
Well, please put your comments down below and stay up to date on these cases by joining me on Court TV and tonight on News Nation. I want to thank you for all your support of Profiling Evil. You can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and here on YouTube. And don't forget, folks, if you like podcasts, please check us out on Profiling Evil Podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. So from all of us at Profiling Evil, thanks again, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.